Hello everyone and welcome back to my Magic the Gathering Commander Deck List Reviews. So this is a series where I either go through my own personal Commander decks or those submitted by users and break them down to the more core mechanics. I go over the Commander, what the deck is generally trying to do, give my critiques, and wrap it all up with my feedback at the end. If you want to get your own deck list reviewed, make sure to head up to the top link in the description where you can get your deck personally reviewed by me. With all that out of the way, let's get into today's review. So today we are talking about another Final Fantasy Commander. There's a lot of really cool ones, and I'll probably be doing quite a few more after this as well, just because we're getting so many unique mechanics and a lot of cool, powerful stuff. One of which being Kefka Court Mage. So this is, I'm not a huge Final Fantasy fan, but I believe the big bad of Final Fantasy VI. Has two different cards and some amazing card art here. So it is a Grixis commander, so 2, a blue, a black, and a red for a 4/5, human wizard, very prevalent. It says whenever it enters or attacks, each player discards a card, then you draw a card for each card type among cards discarded this way. And then you can pay 8 mana, each opponent sacrifices a permanent of their choice, transform Kefka, activate only as a sorcery. And the backside is an avatar wizard with flying, it's a 5/7 that says whenever an opponent loses life during your turn, you draw that many cards. So that backside, very powerful, very amazing effect, great creature. 8 mana, quite a lot to pay, and that's, I think, what a lot of people are going to be probably stuck in a hole with this commander, is trying to flip to the backside as soon as possible to get a very powerful effect of drawing cards when opponents lose life. But really, I think the front side is what we want to be focused on, and what this deck is definitely focused on. And then using the back side sometimes as sort of a finisher if you can, I think is more of what this card is looking for. So firstly, we've got a few board wipes in here. This is, I would say, bracket 3, maybe leaning towards a little bit more bracket 4, just because we do have some powerful stuff. We are only running 3 game changers, but being Grixis, we do have a bit of control, I would say, in here, and it's a discard deck, because that's definitely what our commander's wanting to do. Though we don't have any straight up combo pieces in the deck, I know that there is one immediate one that you can run in here. Though I decided not to try to run any of those, just because we're trying to go for a normal game plan. I'll probably do maybe 1 or 2 more competitive decks in the future, just to kind of show like, hey, this is what we're going for. But I thought, have a little bit more fun with the actual archetype here, because I'm going more towards infinite combos and that sort of thing. You kind of, I would say, lose a lot of the fun cards that are maybe not as good but more flavorful, or pet cards for me a lot of the times. So here I would say definitely leaning towards bracket 3, sort of upper bracket 3. In terms of board wipes, we got 2 of the better ones, the ones that we're only casting for 1 or 3 mana, blast and sacked. Of course, most of the time you're going to be casting this for 1, deal 13 to everything. And then Toxic Deluge, paying, any amount of life with the 3 mana to give all creatures, -X. This one particularly is really good because it gets around indestructible and protection, because it's a minus effect. But yeah, kind of just basic, we don't need a whole lot in here. You could add like a Cyclonic Rift, I think would still be pretty good if you want to go for that. We already are running quite a high budget, and I would say a lot of that is due to Kefka is commanding his own price, and this version of it is a little more expensive, but we do have a fairly good mana base, and I'll kind of explain the reasons why we have, the fetches and shocks and that sort of thing later. But you don't need to have that expensive of stuff in this deck. I think it's very easy, especially if you just, ixnay the game changers in general, still run it as bracket 3. I think you can really build this pretty budget if you want to, but thought we'd have a little fun, kind of splash around. I try not to have anything strictly with budgetary restrictions, because I feel like a lot of times you don't get the full concept of the commander if you can't go full bore with it, but definitely try not to throw, all of the fast men and all that stuff if we can avoid it. But in terms of card advantage, of course, we're in Grixis, so we have really the best access to that as we can. One of my favorites in here being Zombie Later Scrolls. So there is sort of a wizard sub-theme in here, especially just because Final Fantasy has given us a lot of good wizard stuff and a lot of cool, interesting stuff, especially with like the black mage tokens is kind of fun. Azami here, very good, very well-known wizard commander. You can tap an untapped wizard you control to draw a card, and that's super powerful, mostly because you are able to do that at instant speed, because it is Azami, the one that's able to tap other wizards. And so even if, Kefka is down, you have Azami out. Even if Kefka just came down, has Summoning Sickness, because it's the ability of Azami tapping him down and he himself is not tapping, it allows him to tap with Summoning Sickness still. So you're able to do that. Azami just says tap an untapped wizard you control, not another wizard you control. So she can tap herself as soon as she comes down, so she cantrips, which is kind of nice on top of that. All around a very good card, one of our better card advantage engines for the deck. And, when you have all these little tokens coming out and you don't have immediately immediately anything to do with them, being able to, keep them up as blockers, then instant speed at an opponent's end step, draw all the cards you want, and then you kind of start the turn over, can be kind of nice in and of itself. Because we are running a good amount of fetches, and there's always more you can run in here, I do like Brainstorm in this deck. It's also kind of nice because we are also discarding off Kefka's trigger, and there's a few things that we are definitely still built around Kefka's trigger for a lot of what we're doing in here, just discard effects in general. So being able to kind of manipulate the top of your deck, it's like, okay, I would rather discard these cards, so putting those on top, or keeping the cards you want on top and then discarding other cards can be kind of nice, especially if you're going to get a redraw with Kefka. So you can kind of do some manipulation like that. But just in general, being able to shuffle effects is kind of the biggest thing with Brainstorm that you really want to have. I think a lot of people are just running because it's like, oh, it's it's a good 1 mana draw 3, put 2 back. Seems like a very good card, though. I feel like if you're not running a whole lot of shuffle effects, it becomes a lot worse, because if you're just drawing the 2 cards you already drew, you're getting to see 1 card deeper for 1 turn, and then you're kind of just sort of punting the rest of your draws for the next few turns. So getting able to shuffle away the extra cards that you put back is a pretty big deal with this card. So we're doing that kind of thing in here, so I think it's a fairly good include. One of our specific wizard cards in here is Circle of Power. So it's a 4 mana, you draw 2 and lose 2 life, and you create a 0/1 black wizard creature token with, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this token does 1 damage to each opponent, which we have quite a few effects that make those specific wizards. But the biggest thing with Circle of Power says wizards you control get +1/+0 and gain lifelink till end of turn. So that's great because those wizards are dealing the damage. When they have lifelink, whatever damage they are dealing, you're getting life off of that. So if you got 3 or 4 of these little wizard tokens and you cast a Brainstorm or whatever, not only are you dealing a little bit of damage, pinging everyone, you're getting that much life back. And because they are dealing damage to each opponent, it's triple whatever they're doing. So if you got 2 wizards out, they're both dealing 3 damage to each opponent. So you got, with a 4-player pod, 6 life out of 1 spell, which is kind of nuts. I think this place is even seeing a little bit of play in other formats because it's a very good card with that archetype. But just in general, also the card draw, pretty good. Not too bad. Overcosted just for the card draw, but the fact that you get so many effects on top of each other, I think is what makes it worth it. Faithless Looting, just sort of another one. We also do care about the graveyard quite a lot in this deck, so regular discard, that's kind of the biggest part of this card, but also being able to flash it back on top of everything else, just generally a good spell for what we're doing. Flame of Venor, one of our specific wizard synergies, so it's a 3-mana instant. It says choose one. If you control a wizard as you cast this spell, you may choose 2 instead. You can have target player draw 2 cards, destroy target artifact, or it deals 5 damage to target creature. So most of the time, we're always going to be controlling a wizard, or we should be with this deck, so getting to choose 2 modes on this makes it extremely powerful. Getting a shatter and then, a draw 2 is really, really good. Getting divination on top of that, the 5 damage, can also be really nice if you need to kill something. That gets rid of a lot of creatures in the game anymore. So all around, just a very good card. This sees a lot of play in a lot of formats because the modality of it is really, really nice. Frantic Search, I've run this on a bunch of decks because it is mana neutral. It's a 3-mana instant. It says draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards and tap up to 3 lands. So it's got the same synergy as Faithless Looting, where we're discarding with the deck and we're putting stuff in the graveyard. But it allows you to double spell a lot on your turns because you're getting your mana immediately back, which is really cool. And it matters a whole lot for this sort of deck. The cantripping things when we're getting these little pingers, gutter snipe effects with our stuff. So that can be nice as well. I'm Laughing Mad, so this is one of our specific, Kefka type cards, and I didn't realize this because, again, I'm not a super big Final Fantasy person. I just haven't really gotten into it. Is that all these cards with flashback are apparently flashbacks in the game, which I think is really cool. This one specifically is a 3-mana instant. Says additional card cast this spell, and that's a tongue twister. Discard a card and then draw 2 cards. So it's an alright little card. Again, we could like the discard, and the flashback is pretty nice because a lot of times you're going to be discarding these cards and being able to recast them from the graveyard can be really nuts on top of things. Just getting a little bit of extra value out of all our cards is always nice. Speaking of, we've got 2 of these towns in here, the adventure towns. So we got Midgar, City of Mako. So it has a sorcery on its one side that says Reactor Raid. It's a 3-mana adventure. It says you may sacrifice an artifact or creature. If you do, draw 2 cards. So it's just sort of a Knight's Whisper, a Corrupted Conviction Village Rites sort of effect, which it can be kind of nice. A little overcosted, but the fact that it's on land is kind of the big thing. Or otherwise, it's just a tapped black land. So both ways, you're kind of getting a little bit of more value off of that. Just having it do this, I think, is extremely powerful. We are also running Knight's Whisper just because I really do like For card draw, it's one of those, it's a little bit better than the cantrip, you know. Instead of like a ponder, we have where you're drawing one card or preordained and that sort of thing, where you're just straight up cantripping. This is 2 mana draw 2, which I think is a fairly good rate. If you're getting a mana per card is pretty good. One of the better draw effects, I just even for black is pretty good when we're running blue. Running it in here. On top of that, we do straight up have Ponder in here, which again, it's nice to be able to kind of look at the top cards, kind of get what we need out of it. Though Ponder again is by itself is a shuffle effect, which can be really nice. It's just a powerful spell in that, scrying cards can be kind of cool, but being able to reorganize if you want to keep the cards, getting to draw a card after, being able to shuffle is really nice as well. If you're like, okay, these next 3 draws, I need to hit my land drop. Now these are lands, or one of them is a land, whatever, being able to reshuffle and be like, okay, I don't want those, I want a new card. And getting those cards off the top of your library as well is really nice. And then we also have Ren's Resolve, which is basically just another draw 2. I actually really like a lot of these impulse effects, especially because nowadays impulse gives you to the end of your next turn. So this just says exile the top 2 cards of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play those cards. So even if you end up exiling 2 lands off of this, you get to play them until the end of your next turn. So you have 2 turns to play these cards, which gives you enough time to be able to, play 2 lands if that's what you end up getting, or just, have enough mana to cast both cards if that's what ends up happening, even earlier in the game. So I do like a lot of these effects as well. And, it's away from hand attack. So if anyone's, if you get windfalled or whatever, or there's some sort of thing where you're like, oh, I want to keep this around, or, we don't see a whole lot of thought seize or duress type effects in Commander, but if someone is running something like that, you're able to kind of keep those cards away and hidden. And there's exile synergies you can run, but just in general, I like the card advantage this gives us. And then discard. So of course we really like discard because there's a lot of different discard type stuff that we're either caring about our own stuff discarded, but a lot of times we're caring about our opponent's discarding cards. So Akhlazot's Deepest Betrayal is a 5 mana 4/4 flying lifelink. When it attacks, each opponent discards a card, and for each opponent who can't, you draw a card. So that can be card advantage on top of everything, especially when you get them kind of down a lot of discard synergy. You're kind of whittling people out of their hands, and then at the end, there's usually some sort of payoff if they have nothing. They're hellbent in some sort of way. And this one specifically cares about what cards he discards. So whenever an opponent discards a land card, you create a 1/1 black bat creature token with flying. So kind of just nice to have that token generation. And then, of course, if it ever dies, it returns as a land on the other side, like all of these, the cycle of gods from Last Caverns of Ixalan, which is really cool. So kind of always good to keep the card around, which I really like. But yeah, definitely just a 4/4 flying lifelinker can be kind of nice with that discard effect as well. Artist Talent, so this is one of the few cards we have that cares about our discard. So it's a 2 mana class. It's first level. It just says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, which is a lot of our deck, you may discard a card if you do draw a card. So it allows us to rummage, which is cool. If you level it up to level 2 for 3 mana, it says non-creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, which again is very nice. Kind of gives us a little bit of extra ramp, and a lot of our spells cost at least 1 generic mana in some sort of way. And again, they are a lot of times non-creature. And the last level for another 3 mana says if a source you control would deal non-combat damage to an opponent or permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage plus 2 instead, which of anything it synergizes really well with any of our black mages, because instead of just dealing the 1 damage they would deal, they deal 3 damage, so it's triple damage to everyone. If you get like lifelink or something on top of that, just getting that extra 2 damage matters a whole lot, especially if you've got 1 or 2 or 3 of these mages out and you're casting multiple things a turn. They can really bring down life totals pretty fast. Another really cool one that just saw reprint fairly recently, I think in Commander Masters, is Blood Chief Ascension. So it's a 1 mana black enchantment that says at the beginning of each end step, if opponent lost 2 or more life this turn, you may put a quest counter on Blood Chief Ascension. And so with this card, I think one of the reasons it's so powerful is not only that it's 1 mana, it's very easy to get down turn 1, it's the beginning of each end step that this cares about getting a counter on it. So if your opponents are, pain landing or, fetching or shocking or whatever, on their turns, by the time it gets around to your turn, this could have 3 or 4 or 5 counters on it very easily. And it only really cares about 3 counters, because it says whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, if it has at least 3 or more quest counters on it, you may have that player lose 2 life. If you do, you gain 2 life. So this is very easy to get to the threshold of 3 counters on, even within 1 turn cycle, like I said, and it's a very, very powerful ability. Getting to anytime any card goes into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, they lose 2 life and you gain 2 is pretty nuts. Not only because we are, of course, on the discard plan, but if they cast into a sorcery spell, non-permanent, that immediately loses them life. If they mill any number of cards, that loses them life. If they have to, if something dies, they lose additional life. Like every part of it is so huge. A very, very powerful spell, and I think is really nice for this deck, just because it's that additional punishing of whatever they're doing, we just get extra value off of. Next, we got Bone Miser, a pretty well-known one for discard. It's a 5-mana zombie wizard. It says whenever you discard a creature card, you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Whenever you discard a land card, you add 2 black, and whenever you discard a non-creature non-land card, you draw a card. So this is obviously, sort of the opposite effect of Waste Not, Want Not. So Bone Miser is another one that specifically cares about our discards, gives us a bunch of value, which, can be really nice because with Waste Not, you kind of just get whatever your opponents want to give you. And a lot of times they'll give you like lands or whatever when they end up discarding because, a lot of times you can't end up using that mana always giving. It's always a lose-lose situation with Waste Not because you get a lot of value. The card draw, the 2/2 or the mana can always be kind of nice. But a lot of times they just have to discard what they need the least, and that just ends up giving you a whole lot of value. So it's nice having, at least on the backside of Bone Miser, because it's our discard that it cares about, we're able to discard what we want. So it's like, okay, we need more, bodies on the board. We can discard, creature cards. You can get some creature tokens off of that for like, okay, we need some sort of ritual effect. We need a little bit more mana for this turn. We get the double black. It's a little bit weirder with this because specifically with Kefka, it's an ETB or attacks trigger. So when he attacks, everyone has to discard cards. And so using that black mana during combat is very hard. Most of the time it empties before we're able to get to a main phase where we can cast sorcery speed stuff. But even then, just getting cards out of hand can be kind of nice. And, for some of our instant speed effects, removal, that sort of thing, it can be also used for. Guest Grimoire is one I've not actually seen, I think, ever used, but it's a pretty good one. It's a 4-mana artifact that says when an opponent discards a card from his or her hand, you may draw a card. So this is just, hey, a Kefka ability pretty much again. So everyone discards a card. Let's say there's, 3 card types, everyone discards a different card type. You draw 3 cards off of that, just generally, which would be pretty good. And I guess maybe 4 if you discard something different. But most of the time it's, there's going to be some overlap. So even if you get 3 cards off of this, they each have to discard a card, which gives you an extra 3 cards. So attacking, discarding 1, drawing 6 is kind of nuts. Very good, and just allows us to kind of turn on our engine a little bit more, keep our hand very much filled. Next, we got Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger. So this is a 2-mana 6/6. It's one of the Elder Giants from Theros that when it enters, you have to sacrifice it unless it escapes. But it also has an ETB or attack trigger. It says when it enters or attacks, each opponent discards a card. Then each opponent who didn't discard a non-land card this way loses 3 life. And then you can escape it for 2 black, 2 red, and exile 5 other cards from your graveyard. So multiple things here. One, it's just kind of nice to have that effect of, pay 2, this comes down, you get the ETB trigger, everyone has to discard stuff. And then it's in your graveyard, and we are a discard deck. We care about the graveyard type things, and so getting to escape it is very easy for this deck most of the time, either by casting it goes to the graveyard immediately, or just discarding it to some sort of effect and then escaping it from there. Both ways, this card does a whole lot for the deck, and it's very easy to think turn online. Just have a 6/6 that attack trigger discards everything, which is really cool. We've got Liliana the Veil, and man, how far the mighty have fallen. So this is a very well-known Planeswalker, one of the most well-knowns, and I think this card, man, was $70 to $100 at one point, or even more depending on the version, down to $5, so definitely a budget one to throw in here. It's got a bunch of different abilities here. It's got a +1, each player discards a card, -2, does target player sacrifices a creature, and if you can ult it for the -6, you separate all permanents target player controls into 2 piles. They choose 1 pile to sacrifice and the other to keep. So there's a whole lot of different things. We mostly care about the each player discards a card, of course, on this. The downside can be nice, getting an edict effect on someone, having them sacrifice, usually the worst creature, whatever they decide, or if they only have one, a bigger blowout there. But mostly the repeatable discard every single turn off of her uptick, I think, is really the big reason to have it in here. And I guess sort of a budget include, because it's definitely one of the cheaper times to ever get it, which is really cool. Speaking of Liliana, we have Liliana's Caress, so it works really well with the Planeswalker. It's a 2-mana enchantment that says whenever an opponent discards a card, that player loses 2 life. So kind of just Bloodchief Ascension again, except we don't get any life gain off of that. And this one specifically is the discard. It's not from anywhere, so if they mill or something dies or if they cast instant sorcery, we don't get the, any damage off of them for that. But to not have to turn it on for 1 extra mana, and most of the time, Bloodchief Ascension anyways, at least from our doing, is going to be, triggering off of discard, so that can be kind of nice. Megas of the Wheel, so this is just part of the Mega series of a bunch of broken cards. This one is Wheel of Fortune. Of course, I didn't want to include regular Wheel of Fortune because it's just, you don't want to pay $300 for a wheel effect most of the time. So this is a 3-mana 3/3. It says pay to tap it, sacrifice it. Each player discards their hand and then draws 7 cards. So again, a good way to get a whole lot of discard. You could definitely, I think, if you're going this direction with it, I didn't want to go super heavy into wheels. It's a very easy thing to do with discard decks because, if you're having someone discard 7 cards and each of those cards deal them 2 damage or 4 damage or whatever, you can kill them pretty easily, but that's literally just Nekusar. Everyone, knows Nekusar, and that's not a deck I wanted to build. I wanted to kind of keep it sort of away from that specific build, just to have something a little unique, though. I think having 1 or 2 of these effects in here, we've got Magus of the Wheel and Windfall as 2 effects that we can sort of just have a mass discard, get some damage off of it, and even with Windfall, a lot of times, the best way to play this card is to get to a point where, like, oh, I have 4 cards in hand, my opponent has 6. Okay, let's all discard, and then you get a real card advantage out of that on top of whatever discard they also have. Monument to Endurance. This is a really good, one of the few better cards from Aether Drift. It's a 3-mana artifact. It says whenever you discard a card, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. You can either draw a card, create a treasure token, or each opponent loses 3 life. So this is really nice because not only can we trigger it up to 3 times each turn, it's not just your turn. So if the opponent discards cards, or we discard cards on our opponent's turn, we can also get these triggers off of it. Really nice. I think all the effects are really good, especially the draw card and create a treasure token. Being able to ramp off of this can be really nice, especially if you combine it with something like an artist talent where we're able to, like, okay, trigger this multiple times by keeping, casting things over and over and over again. Being able to, even just the lose 3 life at a point can also end up mattering with how much ping we're doing. All around kind of just does a lot for what we're doing. Wrinkle, Master of Pranks. It's a 4-mana 3/3 with flying and haste. We can really get in with it, which I definitely enjoy, and it has the ability to have that evasion with flying. Whenever it deals damage to a player, choose any number or combat damage specifically. You can either have each player discard a card, each player loses 1 life and draws a card, and each player sacrifices a creature. So, of course, the biggest thing with this is each player discards a card. You can then have those players draw cards if you want to keep, the hands full, because that is one thing that you might run into at some point, though if you're kind of just winning already, is when, opponents don't have cards to discard anymore, either because they played them all or, most likely you've been making them discard them all. This can be kind of a nice thing to kind of refuel that if you really wanted to, though each of the modes I think is very nice. It's also nice to get the edict effect if you want to cull everything. It's each player, so you also have to sacrifice a creature, so that could or could not be something you end up doing a lot of the times. You might sacrifice a token if you want to, but mostly the discard, again, repeatable, is very good for what we're doing with the deck. One of our other payoffs for discarding is Synchromancer. So this is a 4-mana 3/3 with flying. It says whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you may gain 3 life, and whenever an opponent discards a card, you may gain 3 life. So I've seen this card played out in a Nekusar deck, and oh my god, does it do so much. Anything you try to do, especially if you're against something aristocrat style, it's just extremely, extremely good. And it counteracts any sort of aristocrats thing, because most of the time aristocrats like, hey, I sacrifice something, everyone loses 1 life. Gaining 3 on top of that means you're always ahead of that, which can be really cool. If someone ends up board wiping and there's a good amount of creatures on the board, you might just double your life total. That can be kind of cool. But of course, the discard is the biggest thing here, where we're getting a whole bunch of life off of any card discarded. Though all around, I think Synchromancer is just a great card. Tiny Bones, Bauble Burglar. So it's a 2-mana 1/3 from Foundations. One of the many Tiny Bones that does a whole bunch of different things. And there, you could run, I think, Trinket Thief if you wanted to in here. But I like this one specifically. It says whenever an opponent discards a card, exile it from their graveyard with a stash counter on it. And then during your turn, you may play cards you don't own with stash counters on them from exile and spend mana of any type that can be spent to cast those spells. It can be 4 mana, tap it, each one discards a card, activate only as a sorcery. So sort of a repeatable discard if you really wanted to. 4 mana is kind of a lot for that, but mostly the fact that we, on top of, we don't really interact with the discards once we've made them discard a whole lot with the deck, so getting a little bit of extra value on top of that, we're like, okay, I'm gonna make everyone discard, and then I get to keep those cards, sort of a Dothy Voidwalker sort of effect, which again is another card you could very much add to this deck. I think one iteration of the deck I had a Dothy in it, or stuff goes to graveyard, you get to exile it or whatever, so even Reanimator decks, that is one thing that might be sort of hard to play against with this is, you know, if you're filling up a graveyard deck's grave, it's like, okay, I have a bunch of stuff in the graveyard I can reanimate or play from the graveyard. That can be sort of a weakness with it, so you want to be kind of careful with that. Though more effects, like if you have a meta that runs a lot of, you know, there's a lot of graveyard decks around, you might run just in general more graveyard hate, but these sort of effects where it's like, okay, when you discard cards, I get to exile from the graveyard, that sort of thing. Speaking of graveyard, we ourselves have a good amount of graveyard stuff because, again, we are discarding cards as well, so we are putting cards in the graveyard. So Anger, Filth, and Wonder is our incarnations, the 3 that we can run. They each care about having their respective their land on the battlefield, so Island, Mountain, or Swamp. And if it's in the graveyard and you control one of those 3 land types, it gives some sort of ability. So Anger, by far, is the most well-known one. As long as it's in your graveyard and you control Mountain, creatures you control have haste, so that's really nice, not only on top of, you know, having Kefka, being able to ETB, you know, get the discard and then attacking at the discard, but just for a bunch of different abilities that can be really useful for. Filth gives our creatures Swamp Walk, so if you're running like an Urborg, I don't think I put it in here just because I'm like, you know, $40 land is a little expensive for a deck I want to sort of keep the budget low on, but that's a very good include just because it allows you to get basically all your creatures unblockable, which is really cool. And then Wonder, if you control an island, it gives all your creatures flying. So again, sort of a similar situation where you're giving some more evasion as well, but a good blocking potential as well. Because a lot of times I've seen, you know, blowouts where someone's running a dragon deck, but no one else is running any sort of flyers, and you just kind of get blown out because you don't have any way to deal with it. So flying by itself can be very useful in that way. Oh my god, Fear of Missing Out. So one of my favorite cards from Duskmourn, it's a 2-mana 2/3 enchantment creature Nightmare. Whenever it enters, discard a card, draw a card, so it gives you a run effect, which again we already have a bunch of synergy for. But one cool thing you could definitely run within this deck a lot more if you wanted to is Delirium. So whenever a Fear of Missing Out attacks for the first time each turn, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, untap target creature. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. So this not only is a good rummage effect for what we're doing, you know, just getting some into the graveyard, when we have enough stuff in the graveyard, we have a good amount of different types of, you know, a good selection of different card types in the deck. To turn on that Delirium, getting 2 combats can be really nice, especially because we have, you know, our combat trigger with Kefka, being able to attack, discard, untap him, get an additional combat to attack again. That can be really nice. Or if you do end up flipping him, getting to deal 2 times combat damage to draw 10 cards can also be really cool. But just in general, kind of a nice card to have. Plus, you know, the kind of cantripping can be good as well. We have Reanimate and Victimize, just the 2 reanimation spells. I didn't want to go super heavy on reanimation just because we're not really a graveyard deck, but I thought, you know, if you're running any sort of this kind of stuff, just having Reanimate by itself would be good enough. You know, 1 mana, put target creature from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. You lose life equal to its mana value, so 1 mana, you're getting to reanimate something from any graveyard. So if your opponents are discarding good stuff as well, you can grab that. But even out of our own graveyard, we have a good amount of creatures that we'd want to get back. And then Victimize I also like because it is a 3 mana double reanimator. So you choose 2 target creature cards in your graveyard, you sacrifice a creature, and then if you do, return the chosen cards to the battlefield tapped. So getting a 2-for-1 off of that is really cool as well, especially if you're like, okay, you know, I had to play a Wonder. You're not wanting to play the incarnations if you don't want to, or like a token or something. Some creature you don't really care about on the battlefield. Okay, I'm going to sacrifice that and then get 2 much better creatures from my graveyard back out on the battlefield. So I just really like Victimize. I think it's a pretty good rate for what you're paying for. And lastly here we have Underworld Breach. So again, no combos with this. This is just a good card for the deck because we're discarding stuff. Underworld Breach is a 2-mana enchantment. It says each non-land card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to its mana value plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. And then we give you your end step sacrifice Underworld Breach. So this is the ultimate way to just replay cards from our graveyard. You're like, okay, it works best with cards with like Windfall if you wanted to, especially because with the discard where you're like, okay, I play this, I cast Windfall over my hand, I'll discard whatever, I fill up my graveyard with cards to be able to exile to Underworld Breach to cast Windfall again. So you could do something like that where you're playing Wheels over and over again to just have a bunch of people discard and kind of blow them out that way. Though just in general, getting extra value off of this, you're like, okay, I'm gonna play Underworld Breach and then reanimate like 2 or 3 things. That could be really good. Just in general, Underworld Breach is a very, very good card, very powerful card, though for this deck it's just kind of giving us a little bit of extra value. Here we got another Final Fantasy card with Emmet Selk, I think, on Sundered. It's a Dimir card, 2/4. It's got Vigilance and says whenever it enters or attacks, draw a card, then discard a card, so a cool little looting effect. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 14 or more cards in your graveyard, you may transform it. So again, that's a fairly easy thing to do with the deck, I think, because we're discarding so many different cards. On the backside, we have Hades, Sorcerer of Eld, so it's a 6-mana vigilance, and it says it has Echoes of the Lost. During your turn, you may play cards from your graveyard, which is just kind of nuts. We get that Yawgmoth effect, very, very good. And says if a card or token we put into your graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. So you're able to kind of get a one extra time off of all of our stuff, sort of a in a way, almost a delayed flashback for like permanent spells, that sort of thing. We're like, okay, I can just replay a whole bunch of stuff. And if you really wanted to, a good thing you could do with this card is, replay a bunch of stuff from your graveyard. And then if you had any way to kill this or just sacrifice it or get it off your battlefield to where you don't have that clause of stuff, gets exiled or whatever, you could, just get free interaction without having any sort of downside off of that. Just a bunch of extra advantage with that. Though I just think it's kind of a fun card on both sides, having the loading effect on the front can be kind of nice. It fuels its own ability, and then it's a pretty good creature on the back. For interaction, we have quite a lot of interaction because we are in Grixis. There's a lot of things that we can do. We've already talked about Flame of Anor, just a good card that does a lot of different things for our deck. We got quite a few counter spells in here, just because they're very good, very easy to run. Kind of get rid of the things we want to before they even hit the board. Arcane Denial, it's kind of nice because I like Arcane Denial not only because it's counter spell, but we get a little bit of card advantage. And again, this can kind of tie into the fueling our opponent's hand to discard as well. Especially if like, oh, hey, I counter something on my opponent's end step or at some point, and then at my upkeep, we get to draw the cards. That's usually best because, if it's not on their turn that they get to draw the cards, and they're more likely not able to use them. So they're more likely to be discarded from your effects as well. Chaos Warp, a catch-all, just like to run this card in these sort of decks because it allows us to get rid of anything that we need to. And we are not in white or green, so we don't really have a lot of good enchant removal. So having this can be good on top of that. We got regular counter spell. We do have our 2 enchant removal in black here. Feed the Swarm, 2 mana sorcery, disrupt a 1 target creature or enchantment opponent controls. You lose life equal to the permanent's mana value, so just a good way to get rid of that. And then Withering Torment, sort of the same thing. 1 extra mana, it's instant speed, and then you lose 2 life instead of losing life equal to the mana cost. So just our 2 ways to really get around that, and the modality of getting rid of either enchantment or creature can be nice as well. Like I said, we already talked about Flame of Anor, destroying artifacts and dealing damage. Negate, just, very much catches a lot of cards as well. Just counter target on creature spell, get rid of board wipes, that sort of thing. Big X spells, anything like that. And we aren't actually running a whole lot of permanent removal besides, a few of these things. We have a lot of counter spell stuff. Weirdly enough, it's kind of surprising to me that the best just straight up destruction is not in black. It's in blue with both Pongify and then the rapid hybridization of just 1 mana blue instant destroy target creature, can be regenerated, and then they create a 3/3. So just good to get rid of stuff off the board. Rakdos Charm is sort of our all-in-one interaction spell. So it's a 2 mana instant. There you choose one. You either exile target player's graveyard, one of our few pieces of graveyard hate, destroy target artifact, or each creature deals 1 damage to its controller, which that last mode can kind of be double-edged because it's everyone, so like if you've got 5 or 6 creatures out, you're taking that damage. But if someone's playing a Skewed Swarm or just has some sort of token deck where they're going really wide, this can very much be a gotcha of like, hey, take 20, and maybe you end up dying off that. And then we got Sinking to Stupor, one of the better cards just in terms of modality because it is a double-faced card. And I really like these ones from Modern Horizons. I didn't realize how good they were because these can be untapped. If you bolt them in, pay 3 life as they enter, they can enter untapped, which is really, really cool. And on the front side, it's just a fairly good sort of counter spell. It's a 3 mana instant. It says return target spell or non-permanent to an opponent's control to its owner's hand. So you're able to bounce stuff from the board or, bounce spells back to the hand, kind of reset them for a turn. And it is also only on the backside. So just kind of all over a very good card. Speaking of lands, we are running 36, 37 with our modal face card, so a good amount of stuff, and we do have quite the suite. We are running, all of our colored fetches, all of our colored shocks. We're running, a lot of our check lands, and a few basics here and there. We're also running our Triome, and the reason for this, like even the Tangle lands and everything, is because we really definitely care about having land types, and it's for a few different reasons, but honestly, more than anything, it's nice to have for some of our lands, of course, like our check lands that care about having specific land types. We can almost always turn those on, which is really cool. It matters for stuff like Arena of Glory to enter untapped. to be able to control mountains. And then really the biggest one in here is Mystic Sanctuary. It enters untapped. It enters tapped unless you control 3 or more islands. And then when it enters untapped, you may put a target instant sorcery card from your graveyard on top of your library. Very powerful card, and we always want this active if we can have it. So that's another reason why, and really the biggest reason I think out of all of them, besides, you know, our incarnations, having the type out can also be kind of important. But the biggest one is definitely the Mystic Sanctuary, being able to get the maximum of value off of this as well. And of course, it's always nice with, you know, having our fetches to be able to grab, because it's not basic. It's any sort of island or, you know, mountain with this or whatever. Being able to fetch out a Mystic Sanctuary to be able to put something on top can also be kind of cool. We've kind of talked about, we've got our 2 adventure lands in here. Talked about the Midgard. We also have Lindblom Industrial Regency. It's got Mage Siege, so it's a 3-mana instant that creates a 0/1 Black Wizard creature token. So just another way to kind of get that ball rolling. And I value those a whole lot in this deck, just because we are casting so many non-creature spells that damage really does add up the more you can get out. Arena Glory specifically is really nice because you can exert it, add 2 red, and then when you spend that mana on creature spells, they can haste on a turn. That's mostly for Kefka, being able to immediately have a mentor and attack at the same time. The one thing to note with Arena of Glory is that 2 red mana does not have to be spent on the same spell. So let's say you have a Kefka that you're casting, and then like, you know, a Harmonic Prodigy or something that you want to be able to attack with any sort of creature. If you spend those 2 red mana on 2 separate creatures, whatever that mana is spent on, it gives them haste. You can give 2 separate creatures haste with this ability, which I think a lot of people kind of gloss over, but it's very much, I think, worthwhile to know with that. And even having to exert this card, getting the haste can, you know, put you up a turn or 2 on top of that. So very much worth it. But Jukabog, you know, of course, we're running black. We kind of need it. Just the easiest piece to run for a graveyard hate. We've got Command Tower and Exotic Orchard as sort of our auto includes. Path of Ancestry, because we are sort of a wizard tribal deck, got a good amount of wizards for the deck. Reliquary Tower, because we are drawing a whole lot of cards, a lot of different stuff. And kind of lastly in here is Skyreach Sanitarium. It has the active ability to pay 2, tap it, each player draws a card, then discards a card. So again, just another discard outlet. But all around, you know, I would say a fairly strong mana base in terms of what we're doing. It can always be better, but you can also, you know, tone it down if you really wanted to. I guess we also have kind of an interesting one for our wizards here is Riptide Laboratory. So it's just a colorless land, or you can pay 1 in a blue, tap it, return target wizard you control to its owner's hand, which has a multitude of effects. Not only, you know, a good amount of our wizards might have some sort of ETB. It can be a protection spell, if someone's going to like destroy Kefka or whatever, being able to bounce it to back to our hand. Though with the ETB stuff, specifically with Kefka, is that they're like, okay, I don't have any good attacks. Well, I can just bounce Kefka back to my hand and then replay him. So that sort of thing. Just all around, I think a pretty good card for, you know, a wizard deck, and specifically this one. I think it's fun to be able to run these sort of weird, very specific, very edge case cards in these sort of decks. For ramp, we have a lot of non-creature ramp, because that's what we're really looking for. And of course, we're in Grixis, we don't have a lot of options for a creature ramp. We've got all 3 of our color talismans. We've got Arcane Signet, Soul Ring. One I really like running a lot of times that's only in Grixis is Relic of Sauron. So it's a 4 mana. Taps to add 2 mana of any combination of blue, black, or red, so just kind of a better Sisay's Ring. And then you can also pay 3 and tap it to draw 2 cards and discard a card. So again, just super synergistic what we're doing, and just a really good mana rock in general. Nightscape Familiar, it's a 2 mana zombie that says blue spells and red spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So just a mana reducer on top of that, and gives us 2 different colors of mana reduction, which is really cool. It's like 2 medallions in 1. You can regenerate it or whatever, but that doesn't really matter. It's mostly the cost reduction. And then rituals, we got Dark Ritual. Or in black, you're always going to be running this. And then Mana Geyser as just, hey, I'm going to cast a whole bunch of spells on my turn and hopefully win the game. Sort of kind of one of those cards I think kind of gets you towards that goal. And then our big boy here, one of the bigger, splashier, more expensive cards to add. But of course, we're in Final Fantasy. We're in Wizards. We're in Grixis. We got Vivi or Ornithia, I think is how you pronounce it, or how it's supposed to be pronounced. So Vivi. 3 mana 0/3. He's got the mana ability to pay 0, add X mana in any combination of blue and or red, where X is its power. And then whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on VV, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So it's also, of course, a black wizard. So synergizes with pretty much literally everything we're doing. So a very, very good include if you can manage it. And lastly here, we do have a little bit of value. We're very, I would say, mostly optimized here, so we don't have a whole lot of value pile. And even these cards, I would say, are pretty optimized for what we're doing. Black Waltz number 3. So this is just another, you know, non-token black wizards we can run. 4 mana 2/2 with Flying and Death Touch, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. So kind of 2 of those Black Wizards in one, because it's doing 2 damage instead of just 1. And it's a fairly decent creature. You know, a 2/2 Flying Death Toucher is also great, but you know, having that wizard card type can matter for certain things, like you know, Harmonic Prodigy, an ability of a shaman or another wizard you control triggers. That ability triggers an additional time. You know, that's very good. You could add Veyran in here if you wanted to double those triggers. And then add in Veyran specifically just because we only have so many cast triggers on our stuff, and I don't want to kind of muck it up with you know, trying to get too many of those off of what we're doing. But you know, always easy to include a very good one. Our 2 other game changers in here, both tutors. So Demonic Tutor by itself, again, just an easy way to get the specific card we need. There's a lot of different things we could grab with this, which is what I like. I don't like tutors as much when you only have one thing to tutor, because then it just feels like, oh, I run 2 of this card in my deck, instead of just, you know, having the ability to kind of find what you want. And I feel like this deck specifically has so many different, you know, avenues you can kind of take with it, whether you're going more towards like discard hate or just discarding in general, or, you know, card draw, you know, whatever your need at the moment. I think this is one of those decks that a Demonic Tutor can be a whole lot of different things rather than just 1 or 2 of the same card every single time. Gifts can given, extremely good for this deck. Now, I ended up having a lot of these in my collection, which is why they're being a lot of my decks. It's, you know, also not a super expensive card, but I do like the ability to finally play this card in this format, because it's, you know, I didn't play when this was ever unbanned. It's a 4-mana instant. It's a search your library for up to 4 cards with different names and reveal them. Target opponent chooses 2 of those cards, put those cards into your graveyard and the rest into your hand. So there's a lot of different things with this card that make it sort of weird, which is why it was broken for so long. The fact that, you know, almost all of our cards besides basic lands are going to have different names, so this is very easy to, you know, meet their criteria on that. But the fact that there is a very weird ruling thing where you can fail to find a unique card. So let's say, you know, you're like, okay, I'm only going to choose 2 of those cards because at least 2 of the cards are being put into your graveyard. So you're like, okay, I'm going to tutor, fail to find 2 unique cards, but find 2 unique cards. So you only have 2 that you're showing to your opponent. Your opponent has to put those specific cards into your graveyard. So you're like, I have a reanimate in hand, but I want to have something in my, I don't have anything in my graveyard right now that I want to reanimate. You're like, okay, or like a victimize even better. Or like, I'm going to go grab 2 really good creatures. I'm going to throw them to the graveyard where my opponent is, off this gifts ungiven, and then I'm going to reanimate them. But even for this deck in general, we have a good amount of, like, we have our Escape God, we have some stuff with Flashback. Being able to just tutor stuff to graveyard, sort of a double entomb, can also be really powerful for what we're doing. But I think really just grabbing all 4 cards, especially if, you know, those cards, I think this card is most powerful when all 4 of those cards are sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't sort of thing, where it's like, okay, you can give me any 2 of these cards and I'm still benefiting a lot, you know, sort of an intuition type effect, where it's like, whatever you give me, I'm still, you know, getting a lot of value off of. So it's kind of just a fun card. A lot of different cases for this that I really enjoy the synergy that it brings to the deck. One of our last wizards here is Go-Go, Master of Mimicry. So it's a 3-mana 2/4. It's got XX tap. Copy target activated or triggered ability you control X times. You may choose new targets for the copies. This ability can't be copying, and X can't be 0. So there's a few things in here, but it's a pretty broken ability. So it can copy literally any activated or triggered ability. So by itself, just normally, it is a Stronic Resonator mixed with the Rings of Brightheart. So being able to pay, you know, 2 mana and get an extra trigger off of any ability, like a Kefka ability or something like that, is nuts. You can do any activated or triggered ability. There's no limits on what it's asking for, even mana abilities. So like if you've got a VV that's like a 5/3 or whatever, getting extra mana off of, you know, Go-Go, you can do a whole lot with that. But like triggered abilities off of, you know, or mages if you really wanted to. There's so much that Go can trigger off of, and it's literally anything. I've even seen people talk about this with fetch lands, because fetch lands have an activated ability where you can go tutor for a land. So being able to copy a fetch land trigger to go tutor out a whole bunch of lands, you could totally do. Just super broad card that has so many applications for the deck. Really any deck that I think it's a really fun one to run in here. Gives us a lot to do, and of course it is a wizard. We got Kuja in here, so this is sort of the Black Mage card. It's a 4-mana 3/4. Human Mutant Wizard, of course. At the beginning of your end step, you create a tapped 0/1 Black Wizard creature token with whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this token deals 1 damage to each opponent. So just a very easy way to get the most amount of wizards we can. And then if you control 4 more wizards, you transform Kuja. So this is all at the end step. It's 1 trigger. So at your end step, you control those 4. It makes 1, and then if you control 4, so if you started the end step with 3, he makes the 1 that you need, and then it transforms anyway. So that's kind of nice. And on the back side, it says if a wizard you control would deal damage to a opponent or player, it deals double that damage instead. So again, just a very awesome way. I really like this because it doesn't say non-combat damage. So when you're getting in with Kefka or whatever, you're dealing double damage off damage triggered like that, and you're also dealing double damage off of whatever cast triggers we have with all of our black mages. And if you stack that with, any of our other effects that deal extra damage with that, you can really get out of hand with this card very fast. And I just like the modality of it, and it really much ups our game for a lot of what we're doing. Can definitely sort of speed up that clock for opponents as well. We are running Lightning Greaves. We have, not a whole lot of haste effects in this deck, though it is nice to have one or two like Lightning Greaves in here, just because having Kefka down, being able to immediately attack with it can be really nice. Or if we have, something else you want to attack with, or just want to protect by itself, if you want to give Go-Go the ability to immediately tap as well. Everyone knows Lightning Greaves is just all around a good card. Roaming Throne, another one of our sort of splashier, more expensive cards. We are, running Wizard Tribal, and even if you weren't just copying Kefka's ability, once would be good enough. It's a 4-mana artifact creature golem it's a 4/4, has Ward 2, and as it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, and it is that creature type into addition to its other types. And if a triggered ability of a creature you control of the chosen type triggers, it triggers additional time. So this card has always been nuts ever since it came out. It's colorless. You can throw it in any deck. It doubles all of our triggers of all of our wizards. So we're getting, all of our black mages are double triggering. So it's basically double damage off of that. If you got like a Harmonic Prodigy on top of that, you're getting a whole bunch of extra triggers because its ability triggers additional time instead of Roaming Throne. So that can be really cool. But really anything like the ETBs, whatever we end up doing with that ability, we have so many triggers of our wizards that this is doing a whole lot of extra for what we're doing. It just makes all of our mileage on all of our creatures go a whole lot farther. And lastly here we have Saw in Half. So I like Saw in Half for a multitude of reasons. I think it's just an amazing card that goes in a lot of different decks. It is a 3-mana instant that says destroy target creature. If that creature dies this way, its controller creates 2 tokens that are copies of that creature, except their power is half that creature's power and their toughness is half that creature's toughness. And you round up each time. And that's kind of important because if you have a 1/1 that you destroy with this, of course, their whatever power they would have half is 0.5, and then it rounds up. So even if you get rid of something, a 1/1 is still going to create 2 more 1/1s. So that can be kind of nice. And the reason this is not in our interaction category because it does destroy creatures, but you almost always want to use this on your own creatures. If you're able to Saw and have like a Roaming Throne or something like that, where you get 2 of them, that's really what it is sort of just a copy effect. It can be, I think the best gotcha with it though, is when you're able to use this in conjunction with, like someone is going to path Kefka or path a Roaming Throne or path or something that we care about, being able to Saw and half it, which we would already probably want to do anyway. You get to fizzle the spell because that creature dies, then the original is gone. It goes to your graveyard, which, can have other effects as well. But you get 2 of them on top of that, so you kind of just do the whole thing. It can act like a counterspell on top of things if you use it in the right situation, though just in general, even getting like double Kefkas can be kind of nice because of course one of them legend rules away, but he does have an ETB trigger, which both will be affected by and immediately get the trigger off of. So just that, basic thing by itself would be good enough, getting that extra thing, a whole bunch of extra cards off of that. But in general, we have a whole lot of, non-legendary creatures, like actually a Bone Miser would be pretty nuts. 2 Sangromancers would be really sweet. There's just so many different creatures in this deck that having 2 of would make it extremely good. 2 is always better than 1. You get so much extra value off of having that. Though, of course, the biggest one being our trigger doublers. If you can get another one of those, it just kind of gets nuts. But I love this card. I think it has a lot of good applications. And you could help an opponent if you wanted to, sacrifice their thing if you wanted to, be like, okay, here, I'm gonna give you 2 of this creature, and in whatever way to politic that way, though most of the time it's just amazing with our cards. And if you are running some sort of graveyard deck, let's say we do have a Harmonic Prodigy and you have a reanimated on top of that, you could just Saw and have the Harmonic Prodigy, you get 2 of them, the original goes to the graveyard, and then you could reanimate the one from the graveyard on top of that to have the 2 tokens and the original card. So there's a lot of different things you can do with the card. It's one of my favorites. I think it's a very goofy effect. Of course, Saw in half, you're cutting a creature in half. Deadpool as a pretty good way of showing it here from Infinity, though I think it's a really, really cool effect that I think kind of gets slept on a little bit. I think it's super, super good, and whenever I get to use this, most of the time it's providing with so much value. So yeah, I kind of just think this is a fairly fun little interesting deck. I'm not a super huge control player. I don't think I actually have any control decks really built in paper, though. So some of these may look a little softer than they could be comparatively, like a Stola, and that might be not as control as some people could make it. Stacks, that's not really my sort of cup of tea. Though I think this is a good balance of things where we get to do our game plan. Though I also don't like any controller stack decks that don't do anything besides stacks you out. Like if I'm only controlling your game plan, if I'm only making you discard, and I'm not advancing any of my own game plan. It's kind of just a game of solitaire, and even sometimes it's less than that, you know, where you're just like, hey, I play land pass, because no one can do anything at that point. So having all of our ability to, you know, really capitalize on the sort of control that we're doing, I think is super important, and that's why I really like building this deck. Besides all that, I hope all you have enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to, you know, do all the leave, like, subscribe, all that sort of thing. If you want to see this deck list in its entirety and you kind of get it for yourself, I will leave the mock fill link in the description below. If you want to look at any of the other YouTube videos I've done on, you know, all these deck lists, I will also leave you a link to the playlist down below as well. With all that being said, I will see all of you in the next one.